And we are live. Well, welcome, ladies.
Hey.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Facebook. So I want to thank you, ladies, for joining me tonight for Let's Talk About.
Right.
And as we dive into this conversation, I like to set the tone. I want to set, it's important for us to have an intention in going into this conversation because, with intention, it gives us direction in the way in which that we can go, so that to ensure that, it is what we say we're going to do, we actually accomplish. So the intention that I, have for this conversation, just in general, as regards to Let's Talk About conversations, it was originally, set up, and I had initially launched these conversations in 2016 when I was at Pfizer. And it was there that I was the lead in the Community Engagement Committee on the Pfizer African American Leadership Network. And I initially implemented these conversations to educate the Pfizer community about diseases that impacted our community more harshly than others. Those what I had focused on was lupus, one, and sickle cell was the other one. So we would have these lunch and learn conversations. I would bring, people in from the different foundations, and we had a whole sickle cell awareness day, and just the whole month of May was sickle cell was for lupus, and for September it was for sickle cell. So being able to utilize my platform at Pfizer as a way to educate in areas that were, disproportionately impacting our community was a very supportive way in which, I was using my platform as a way to support our community in all aspects. And this year I decided to relaunch those conversations after, I left at Pfizer in 2017. And it came to me to really relaunch these conversations and to actually develop it into a more of a series of conversations that I would hold monthly, and invite distinguished guests such as yourselves to bring conscious awareness to situations and circumstances, not just related to disease, but just situations and circumstances that disproportionately impact our people. So that we can then as a community come together and unitedly commit to be a part of the change to move the needle forward to healing and wholeness in our community, because the individualism, that is not ours. Our initial way of being was as a community. We did things as a community. So my thought and what my passion is that if each of us as part of the community make a commitment, just one commitment, to move the needle forward to healing and wholeness, what would that look like of a ripple effect? Of each of us contributing to something, whether it just be a new way of being. It could just be, having open conversation at the dinner table with our children to understand how their day went. Yeah. It could involve becoming more aware of the various diseases or things that have been passed down through the family line, learning about the emotions attached to them, and going to therapy to get some support. It could just be an act of kindness, supporting an elder when you see them, picking up their bag, whatever that looks like. But just one positive commitment to create and to move that needle forward to healing and wholeness in our community, because it's possible, but it takes a community effort to do so. So that is why I had restarted these conversations, and I'm so grateful for you to be a part of this one. And tonight's intention regarding domestic violence and breast cancer, this conversation around those, because October is Breast Cancer and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So it is my intention to have an authentic conversation and discuss alternative viewpoints related to breast cancer and domestic violence and their impact on the Black community in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness and Domestic Violence Awareness, to educate, to offer support and possible alternatives to the community that can move the needle forward to healing and whole wellness, so that we as as a people shift from survival mode to living the life we desire and deserve. So as we jump into our conversation, I'd like to first give you to the floor. We have another guest that's going to be joining us shortly. So I'd like to open up the floor for you to introduce yourselves. If you state your name and what your expertise, your profession is, that would be great.
Okay, so thank you, Daphne. My name is Dr. Monique Swift. I'm a psychologist, and I specialize in the area of trauma. And to keep it brief, I can say more, but
oh, that's fine. That's perfect.
Okay.
Oh, well, my name is Daphne Gilstrap. I'm the owner of Atlantic Wellness Center. First off, I have to say, in listening to your intention for these conversations, just maybe 15 minutes ago, I got off the phone with a mother who lost her son to sickle cell.
Wow.
So, hearing how we can put healing back into our community just right now extremely resonates because that mother needs that support. But I'm a holistic wellness coach and provider. I teach a variety of Eastern healing modalities, and I'm just excited to be here with everyone.
Awesome.
And I'm sorry, but where are you out of? I'm out of New Jersey, by the way. Are you?
Yeah, Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Are you in Jersey as well?
Yes,
Okay.
so I'm between New Jersey and Delaware, so I'm in the area.
Nice, cool.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll have to talk.
You see, I'm making a mental note. I know somebody else out there was thinking the same thing. Where can I find her?
Exactly. And after this conversation, I'm sure people will be wanting to find all of you.
Right.
So I will definitely enjoy you for everyone to, at the end, we're going to share like information so people can contact you. And when I post the comments and things, I'll be sure to include your information as resources because you're both dynamic resources. And, and part of, why you're here is because, you've supported me on my journey, right? In some way, shape or form. And we have, here comes Allissen. 1 second, excuse me. So, as we have, crossed each other's paths and even crossed, many oceans, Monique, in our journey.
And hopefully future oceans.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Part of those oceans, those oceans are interesting.
Yes.
In our journey and to the motherland. So it's an honor and a privilege to have you all here. And our dear sister Allissen is joining us. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful. And you, gorgeous. It's so good to see you. We were just doing our introduction. So you had perfect timing.
Perfect timing, huh? I am Allissen. I am a spiritual life coach. And I also work in the capacity of real estate. I'm a real estate agent and a mortgage banker. So I've been in that industry for since 2006, 2007, and then hit a beautiful journey that led me into some of the other things that I do. I also have a 360-degree view wholeness center where we do a lot of my intuitive healing services come into play in that, and a lot of Reiki, working with energy and inner child work. And so that's a little about me, where I am now.
And would you tell everyone where you're located?
I am in California. I am in Riverside, California. It's kind of maybe an hour east of LA. So kind of the Inland Empire. I service like kind of Riverside, Corona areas.
Okay.
I'll have to talk too.
Other side of the world.
Yes. But we all come together in a healing vibrational energy. So
Yes.
it's we're all brought here at this moment with purpose. So as we kind of dive into this let's talk about conversation, as I had briefly highlighted earlier about our our community being a communal-based organization or community of people versus an individualized, European way. We are, as African people, we are centered on community. So this purpose in this conversation is of each of us sharing and inputting and positive energy into the community so that we can support in the vibrational energy being lifted within our community so that we are now making more conscious choices. We are being guided and allowing ourselves to be and live in our true authenticity. So as we kind of dive into this conversation, I wanted to start with domestic violence, intimate as it's being, referred to now as intimate partner violence. There is, in my research, there is an amazing organization located in St. Paul, Minnesota. We will be the change, I believe. And it's an organization that actually focuses on intimate partner violence in the Black community. And not only in the community here, but also on the continent. And it works with organizations in Ghana and South Africa. And, there's a couple, like 4 different countries that they work with, but just kind of looking at how this impacts us globally as a people is why I really wanted to kind of highlight and start there, because some of the emotions and things that happen that can cause violence can then be trapped in the body, which then can manifest into physical ailment. So first, let's just, define what domestic violence is, because, it's often, referred to as, physical abuse and things like that. But what is the actual definition of domestic violence? Domestic violence is defined as a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. Okay, so that is what domestic violence is. It's a pattern of abusive behavior. Doesn't always have to be in the physical. Abusive behavior, it can be emotional, it can be verbal, and all of these impact our mental health. And what I know to be true from an experience of not physical domestic violence, but of being emotionally and mentally abused, it can live on for a long time and allow itself to uncover itself over a time period more and far beyond what you could imagine. It was that experience that spurred me to be here, because it was that experience that I left and was like, what was wrong with me? That's what I felt at the time, that there was something wrong with me that I felt, or that situation was love. What was it in my experience? And oftentimes the things that we don't talk about are the abusive relationships within our own family circle, the bullying that may happen between siblings, the overpowering or control that happens between parent and child, or child and parent, just all of the different dynamics within the family that can then spill over into adult relationships, which can cause one to seek control and power over another, thus creating a domestic violence situation. For me, that situation that I spoke about that I left, after about a first year in of mental, emotional, not knowing what's happening, I reacted, because that was the only way I knew to hurt. I was hurting internally. I didn't know how to verbalize it. So I physically tried to hurt a 6'3", 240-pound man. But at the time, at a whole 135 pounds, right? Y'all laugh, but
it didn't work out well for you.
Didn't work out well for him.
Oh.
Run and had to go to court. And what that was shock me into the reality of saying, you are not to hurt or physically harm someone that you say that you love.
Mm.
What was it that caused me to strike? Well, I found out through conversation that was something that my parents did. I didn't know, I didn't grow up with my parents. But energetically, that was my reaction. So there's a lot of different dynamics that can impact domestic violence. There are a lot of different dynamics that we don't always have open conversations about that impact domestic violence. Can any of you speak on even experiences in this space? Or yeah, I'll just say that. Can any of you speak on any experience in this space that you know personally or have witnessed?
One of the things that resonates with me is when you define domestic violence and then we, target intimate partner violence. As a survivor, it's almost as if you want the physical because people believe you. But when it's the intimate partner violence, people don't believe you. They don't see that part. They don't see the scars. So I think it always resonates resonates with me when I hear it. Does so much of that control, when you look at the control wheel and you think of how they, financially, verbally, they squish you down. And you don't even know what's happening to you. You're still always like in that loop trying to figure out what's going on because it's not as obvious as if you have the physical parts that go along with it. So I think when just as, the experience of really figuring out it's not me, because I used to wonder, is it me? But then looking and saying, no, it's not me. These are the conditions that have been taught to me and passed down that I learned that I had to unlearn in order to move into my healing. So, that's been my experience. And it's still a journey. It is still a journey getting through it and understanding the difference and being aware. Now I'm aware. So I can go back and say, wait a second, that sounds familiar. And I can make better choices for myself, but that's my experience.
Thank you for sharing that.
I was touched, Daphne, by your statement of like, you almost want the physical piece. Now, I know you didn't mean that literally.
Right.
But I understand the kind of psychological dynamic that would lead to you saying something like that. Because that other element that, when you think about domestic violence or intimate partner violence, you kind of think about the bruises and the bumps, you think about the battering, you think about that. But what people often do leave out and don't think about is that coercive control piece, right? Which is extraordinarily abusive as well, right? That piece that, the instilling of fear, the intimidation, right? Like you said, the financial control, putting people down, making you need me, you'll never be anything without me. I do this for you, you need me, and the gaslighting experience is so profound and it's so damaging. That person really gets inside of your psyche and is controlling you from the inside. And it's like, it does leave you kind of like, is it me? And so that really resonated with me when you said that. But in terms of my experience, I haven't personally experienced this type of violence. However, in my practice, I must say that I never put a number on it, but if I had to guess, of the women that I deal with, and I haven't come across any men, because we know this happens to men as well. I don't want to have a lopsided conversation, but of course the numbers do fall predominantly on the side of women experiencing this. But I would say a good between 80 and 90% of the women that I've worked with have some sort of history of this type of violence, whether it is in their relationships or even kind of growing up, this type of being molested, sexually molested, being kind of gaslit really by somebody who's, in the house, don't tell, that type of thing. So I've seen that a lot. And the thing that really gets me with all that I've seen is because, Sarah, you opened up beautifully and talked about the community, right? The thing that I see with the clients that I've worked with is the lack of community, right? The fact that somebody could or would reach out and people are like, they don't see it. Or most particularly, the most common story is I tell my mother and my mother said, I don't believe you, or it's your fault. And I'm not, putting down mothers. We bear a lot. However, I'm just wanting to highlight the community piece and how we're not there for each other a lot of times when it comes to this.
Yes. Allissen, do you have something?
Yes, definitely. Sarah, when you were opening up, I kind of thought back, and it's just been kind of coming to me now, or making different connections. Being a child that witnessed my mom go through domestic violence and make choices, and how that really shaped my relationships, not really seeing, and I know you were describing your story where you got to enough was enough, but then I was always at the place where I was already looking for the defense. Like, I wish somebody would, because of that. So it created this over self-reliance, this over dependence, and it really kind of goes into my story later of my diagnosis. But it was just always this kind of survival mode, or very reactive in relationships, looking for that or expecting that, and how I held that energy. And in a sense, it was always hush, or we do this in silence. You can't tell grandma, you can't tell. So if the community was there, it was sense of this stays in our house. Yeah. So we learned patterns of hush, you suffer in silence, you go through this alone. And how that really shaped, as a 4, 5, 6-year-old child, this place of survival. And how that showed up time and time and time again, not only in relationships, but just how I moved through life in a sense of surviving or expecting, or this reactive stance to everything. And so, yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Because that what happens is we don't oftentimes understand why we're reacting. And in a second, I'm gonna ask you, Monique, to elaborate on how ancestral trauma, right, how that can show up in our day-to-day. One thing I wanted to piggyback off of what Dr. Swift said is the statistics, right? The statistics right now, every 9 seconds, there is an act of domestic violence. So just in the conversation that we have right now, you figure in every 9 seconds, if you stay in a minute time, that's what about 7 acts of violence that take place in 1 minute. When you drill that number down to, our community, there are the statistics are just amazing. And not amazing in a good way. It's just, mind-boggling at when I saw a post where someone had recently said that they had never met a Black woman that had not been raped, somehow molested, ever. They had never met a Black woman who had an experience of some type of sexual trauma in their life. So with that being, just kind of setting the tone there, data shows that more than 4 in 10 Black women experience physical violence with an intimate partner, versus white, Latina, or Latinx, that's the proper, or and Asian and Pacific women, those rates are very much lower. But Black women, more than 4 in 10 Black women. So that could be us right here. have experienced intimate partner violence. Then when you kind of look and drill even further down into those, what that looks like is, that looks like more than 20% of Black women being raped during their lifetime. A higher number of women overall. It looks like Black women being at a higher risk of being killed at the hands of another, of a man. And most times, and there was 80% of the women who are killed by their partner were on their way out. They were leaving. So these are the scary statistics that face our community. These are the statistics that, impact conversations like this. And why it's important, because, also that was, that struck me, struck a chord in myself, was the high rates of the psychological abuse of Black women. We are more likely to be humiliated, to be insulted, to name calling, or coercive control. Any other woman. And that isn't just happening in intimate partner relationships. That is happening amongst women. That is happening in our own families. Crybaby, right? Tattletale. All those things that you say as a child, you learn to mute yourself as a child, unfortunately. And then that muting as a child turns into muting as a teenager. And that boyfriend or girlfriend that verbally abuses you, grabs your arm, you're scared to go talk to somebody at their locker or whatever. And then it turns into you muting yourself as an adult. Then sometimes that muting yourself can end up costing you almost your life, until you are able to say enough is enough. It is time for me to shift this behavior and learn what this behavior is that keeps showing up in front of me, because now I get to make a choice. I get to choose to understand my family pathology. I get to choose to understand what what has impacted me environmentally, ancestrally, and what all the things that have impacted to make me me. And now I get to make a different choice. And now I can shift this. I now know that I deserve to live. I now know that I am enough. I now know what self-love is. Right? So as we tap into and we look at what this looks like, we want to look at it from men too. Although none of us are men. However, there is a book that I referenced, and it was a book written by a social worker on behalf of her son, who was a victim of domestic violence. And she wrote this book. It's a sister. She wrote the book. And it's intimate violence for male perspective. And even though he was raised, it talks about behaviors. Don't want to give the whole book away, but it talks about behaviors that he learned in a broken relationship between her and her ex-husband that can then transferred over into a young, where the young lady was controlling and utilized various different things and trying to control him. It was very verbally abusive, right? Excuse my language. There are many men who women call men and be like, "What your bitch ass," or they call them, and call them out their name, and in that way. But that is abuse, ladies. That is abuse. Because as I defined domestic violence earlier, it's any pattern of use of abusive behavior in a relationship. And that abuse, just as women are, being name called and insulted, how many men are being insulted because they may have been laid off? How many men are being insulted because maybe they're underpaid, right? How many men have been insulted? And is that better? My sound better?
Yeah.
If the, you know, how many men have been insulted? Thank you for that. How many men have been insulted because of different various circumstances? Or how many men have been told, men don't cry, suck it up, right? And how does that show up into relationship? So, you know, overall, this is a community problem. This is an issue that we have witnessed. You see it on social media constantly. We have witnessed in our own personal lives, and what has brought us each here has brought us making different choices to make a different, to have a different experience. And whatever that experience is actually living versus being in survival mode, like what Allissen had mentioned earlier. So shifting that dynamic. So I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted and the importance of what this looks like in our community, because there are so many economic factors that contribute to the violence that happens within our communities. And it doesn't just necessarily have to be just domestic violence. There's sexual violence, there's sexual abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's economic abuse, there's psychological abuse, the various different violences, forms of violence. All of these experiences make up the various different components within our community. And unless we talk about it, and unless we bring it to the forefront where we can actually see why there may be a higher risk of suicide in our community, why there may be more mental health issues or PTSD that people experience because of this reoccurrence of behavior that continues as a cycle, but someone has to stop it. Why not let that be you? So as we tap into and shift into the conversation regarding to breast cancer, I wanted to just highlight of the importance of understanding how emotion plays a part in our behavior, because it's the emotion, the feeling of rejection can be the feeling of not feeling enough, feeling of anger, rage, and all of those things that come up, which cause a person to strike, whether it be physically, whether it be verbally, whether it be in behavior. And with all of these things and how a person reacts, just as if we can, adopt our grandmother's green eyes or our grandfather's nose, we can also inherit behaviors and feelings that can come up, right? Just like we can adopt physical things, we can also adopt emotions, and we can adopt, different behaviors. And sometimes in our own, lives, what I've learned from my spiritual life coaching teacher is that whatever is coming up for healing. And I wanted to ask Dr. Swift if you could speak on just a little bit about trauma and how trauma can be, what trauma is and how trauma can show up in our lives, even some ancestral traumas that we can, experience.
So trauma. So essentially, I always kind of lean on a simple definition that SAMHSA gives of trauma that kind of looks at three factors being needed. One, there's some sort of event that happens, and that event is experienced as threatening, harmful in some kind of way, and there's a lasting impact or lasting effect of that. And so this is trauma. And when people experience trauma, the last piece of that is the effect. There is a lasting effect. It doesn't just go away because the trauma stops. I was abused as a child and I'm no longer abused and therefore I'm fine. And a lot of people kind of they misunderstand, and they don't get that lasting part. I think, Allissen, you gave a really good example of that when you talked about your own personal experience, when you were saying in reaction to the trauma that you were a witness to, you began to react. That was trauma for you, right? And that happens in so many different ways. That's just one example, but it happens. And so we see that there's this cycle that trauma creates. It doesn't just stay with the person. When someone experiences trauma, often if they don't heal from that trauma gets passed on to other people in other ways, whether it's their spouse, their children, other people that they interact with. So it doesn't just stay contained with that one person. It is truly a public health issue.
Mhm.
And so even through generations, epigenetics has showed us that trauma can be intergenerationally transferred, right? So that's happening also. So not only just kind of on this, emotional level, am I experiencing what I'm experiencing, but I also am inheriting from those that came before me. If they experience trauma, I am inheriting that predisposition or vulnerability, if you will, to that trauma reaction as well. And so that's there also. And so it definitely, it's something we talk about, family curses, right? It's something that a language that we use, these family curses, and it keeps going. I was referencing earlier with the sexual abuse and a lot of the women that I work with, and that more commonly than not, unfortunately, this woman has, as a child, said something to a parent and they were dismissed, they were blamed. And the other part of that I didn't say that's important to recognize is that a lot of times I believe that's happening because in order for me to acknowledge your trauma, I've got to now confront and acknowledge my own. And so these things are passed, these things are in families, and this child often is not just isolated as being an only victim of sexual abuse. Usually mom was a victim, and grandma was a victim, and great grandma was a victim, right? And so this goes back on, needless to say, we know what's happened during slavery, right? And so we have this long trajectory of history that has, led us to it and handed down to us this sexual trauma, or like you talked about, even the violence on that end of it, right? That can be transferred as well. And so, so that's there. And so I guess I can wrap it up by saying that we have to, going back to how you opened up, Sarah, we have to push the needle, right? We have to become part of the solutions. We have to break these cycles of violence where they are, because if we don't, and when we don't, we become just another link in the chain and strengthen that violence, that trauma to continue on beyond us. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It does.
Okay.
It does. Thank you. It does. Yes, thank you. And I appreciate your and how you really broke down and how the trauma can pass on, right? And how this can be passed on and decisions can be passed on because, of what we were talking about in this community of, there are emotions and feelings and things that can be passed on. What are the couple things that domestic violence, when you first say domestic violence, what is the emotion? It is rage, it is anger, right? So when you think about rage, when you think about anger, as a child, kind of going back to what Allissen said, those things can get trapped in the body, right? That trauma can get trapped in the body and then manifest itself as disease. And one of the one of the emotions that through research and, that I've learned is that anger, resentment are emotions that are underlying emotions of cancer. And I'll share with you from one of my favorite books, Your Body is Telling You to Love Yourself, what the emotional block of cancer is, which will be a nice segue into our conversation related to breast cancer. But it reads that cancer is the result of significant emotional wounding that was experienced in isolation during childhood. The most common emotional wounds that can manifest as serious physical disease are rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice. Some people have endured a number of combination of these wounds. If you suffer from cancer, you're probably a very loving person that wants to live in a loving world so much that you have completely repressed your feelings of bitterness, resentment, and even hatred towards one of your parents. You may even have blamed God for what you went through and still blame him for the state of your life. These suppressed feelings are not even acknowledged, let alone dealt with and released. So they are left to accumulate and gather in the body, to grow every time something awakens the emotional wound. This emotional critical mass has been reached, the cancer will surface. And when you think about the rates of Black women who are the fatality rates of Black women. Black women are pretty much diagnosed almost at the same rate of white women. But we are more than 40% more chance and more likely to die as a result of breast cancer. And when you think about the emotions that were mentioned, resentment, the repression of your feelings, of anger, and you just wanting to love. Just think about the love that we as Black women have for our men, for our children, for our community, being the backbones of the community. Then you think about all of the things that we have experienced, being the subjects and experiments in American gynecology, right? Just being, not having say-so over our bodies, our grandmothers and great-grandmothers being raped, right? All of these things impact us because American gynecology was just late 1800s. That wasn't too long ago. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was born like 1913. So that's like my great grandmother's time. So think of that anger that our women and those that came before us have faced. And all of the things that we have to overcome that many of us marinated in. How that can be trapped in our bodies and can cause us to have a different experience than anyone else. Think about fibroids, think about cervical cancer. These diseases, heart disease, stroke, all of these diseases impact Black women more than anyone else. Harsher. What does that look like for us? That's the story, but we get to make a different choice because we live at a different time and we have many different resources and which can shift in having a different experience. And as we lead into our conversation related to breast cancer, Allissen, I would like for you to share your experience relating to being diagnosed with breast cancer, the denial of treatment. Take us down that road.
All right. So let me see. All right, so let's put you in the mindset of my life, and it really speaks. And Sarah, I'm always my first client and always open for awareness. But what I did write down when we were discussing and even making more connections of childhood and the way that trapped emotions showed up physically. For me, I heard the word internal violence. Like it wasn't, I didn't experience domestic violence from the outer, but I had learned how to, this kind of self-inflicted pain or this internal violence of self and silencing my voice, because I know there was many situations where in my mom, I always was told, oh, you're very strong type of, even as a kid. And I would one time told her, why don't you just leave? And her response was, hush, mind your business. And so in that process, I learned that my voice didn't matter, or when I felt something was wrong, to hush. So in 2009, I was 30, 31, kind of in my, just hit 30. Just gave birth to my son and going through the breastfeeding process. But in my life, and listen to the parallels, I was working commercial real estate all day, and then I would come home and do residential deals all night. So we're talking about the little girl that learned survival, and now I'm moving in that space. And what I'm doing to my body, physically, emotionally, is just go, 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 survival. So working day and night as a single mom and having my second child. I had a son already and just delivered Jelani, which is my youngest son. And breastfeeding, I was just having such a hard time breastfeeding on one side, on my left side. And so I went to the doctor and, I'm like, okay, there's a little lump here and I'm having some bleeding after feeding. And it's like, oh, don't worry about it. It'll go away. Just put some, some heat on it, and hey, it's getting worse. It's a little tender. It's getting a little bigger. No, it's a clogged milk duct. I was like, okay, it's a clogged milk duct. I stopped breastfeeding and just assumed the clogged duct would, take care of itself, and time went on. And Jelani's probably about 8 months at this time, and I'm in the shower one day and I go to lift my arm and I can't lift my arm. And I touch under my arm and there's a mass now under my arm. So I immediately go back to the doctor, and this time everyone's in a rush, like something. This is a little different, a little urgent, and biopsies were ordered, and at this time I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I remember his response to me was, "You should have come in sooner." I was like, "Whoa!" It's like, you talk about the rage and what started to come up emotionally, and your fighting system. So from that point, I was told, you should have come sooner. We have to do some pathology reports, being that it was under my arm, there's some lymph node involvement at this point. So went for further scans, testing. And at that time I was diagnosed with a very late stage cancer. And there's, several different types of cancer. At this time, I was diagnosed with HER2 positive, which is very aggressive. At the time, the survival rate for 2 years, I think, was less than 50%. To get to 5 years was less than 5%. And I was already extremely late stage 3, meaning lymph nodes are involved here and under my arm. And it was at that time, it was 6.7. It was a big tumor. Okay, now we're rushing. Hey, go talk to this oncologist. We need to get you into treatment. And so at that point, I just really started to, okay, let me educate myself what's going on. I started to research what is HER2, what's the active treatment. So I'm coming from a book space, okay, like, hey, I can beat this, let's go. If I have to do chemo, if I have to do whatever, let's get going. And went and met with the oncologist in my first appointment, and I had it, okay, HER2, this is the standard treatment and this. And he's like, yes, you need to go to treatment ASAP, like today, but you need to call your insurance company. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna call them as soon as I get home. Like, what? Let's keep it going. Like, let's schedule this and let's schedule that. And being that I was in real estate, self-employed, I always had my own insurance policy, and went home, called my insurance, and I'm speaking to the representative, and I'm like, hey, you know, this is urgent. I don't know what's going on. I was told to call you, but I need to get chemo, and I mean, it's just fat. Everything is just, I'm trying to move everyone along. And she's like, ma'am, you know, I hear you, but there is something on your policy. There's something at the bottom where you check if you wanted to include chemotherapeutic services, and you didn't check that. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, fax it to me. I'll check it right now. Let's keep it going. And she said, no, ma'am, at this point, it's too late because you're already diagnosed and it's pre-existing. So there's nothing we can do. So I remember like the rage and just feeling like I went from this pleading to like, I have kids. I could send you pictures of my sons, like someone was literally holding my life like in their hands. And at the end of the day, she hung up on me. Boy, what did she do that for? Anytime then there's that rage, and I was spent like the rest of the day trying to find customer service rep, and I was just gonna call and go off. And then it was like, I'm going to the office. I wanted to blow up, you know, it was just this rage that I didn't have a say or any control, that was it. You're telling me that this is the answer, that this is it. And so it's like, okay, let me not spend my energy there. Okay, let me try to reach out to Cancer Centers of America, to all of the Colemans and all of the agencies, what's available. And from local agencies, oh, we'll pay for one treatment, but that's it. American Cancer, oh, we'll send you a list of people to call. So it was just like this wall after wall after wall. And I was like, okay, well, Medi-Cal, maybe I can get some Medi-Cal. I went to the office to see if I could apply for Medi-Cal. And they said, you own a home, you make too much money, you have too much money in your account. So it's like, I did everything in life I felt I was supposed to do. Now, when I needed this, it was like, no. So I went back to the doctor, and he outlined, okay, this chemo is $37,000, and you'll need it I think at that time it was every 3 weeks. You need the pre-meds, which is another $20,000. The after-med shot, the Neulasta shot, was $7,000. And I was, okay, calculating, and I'm looking, okay, I own my home. I had to even process, okay, maybe if I move my home in my mom's name and I could go back. I mean, it was just nonstop. You're talking about sleeping and trying to move in this state and look at your kids and try to have some, you know, essence or resemblance of something normal. Nothing. The whole world looked completely different for me from that moment. There was no trust in this outer system, or this like, what, how, what. And so like, I meet with most women, like, what in the world did I do to deserve like this? And then all of the church background, the guilt, the shame, okay, you know, whatever I did. And so all of that began to just surface and just started to come up. And so at the end of the day, there was no outside. My doctor told me, you can cut your breast off. We can do a lumpectomy. And I was like, but it's in my lymph nodes. I had enough awareness of that's how it travels. That's how it kills. If you cut my breast off, what does that do for me? Nothing. And I had to ask, if I'm moving my assets, I'm about to spend all of this, and I still have kids, what is chemo gonna do for me? And the doctor said, we're really looking at extending your life 6 months to a year. So at that point, I said, I would rather my assets go to my kids, and we're just gonna, take it a day at a time. And prior to that, I continued to have this dream at 3 a.m. before I was diagnosed. And a lot of the gifts and experiences that I experienced in the childhood home where there was abuse, where I had to hush my voice, I would say, hey, I'm having this experience, I'm seeing these things, I'm hearing from other, and Sarah, I'm coming the way that I come. So I'm having experiences from ancestors or from other things. And I was always told, hush, that's not happening. You're not seeing that. And so I learned to suppress that as well. But right before I was diagnosed, I continued to have this same dream. Things began to happen in my home that something's trying to communicate to me, and I was pushing it away. And so once I hit all of this on the outside, said no, I was like, okay, hold up. Like, okay, every morning at 3 a.m. I was having this dream. So I started prayer at 3 a.m. every morning. Every morning, each morning I would get up and I would go into my office downstairs and I would meditate and I would pray. And one morning I heard, and then after getting up from prayer, I would go back into my room and I would start writing letters to my kids. My youngest son's first day of school, my older son's wedding. Like, I was preparing for transitioning. And so one morning I was getting up to go to prayer and I heard, you might as well stay in your bed. You know, what good does it do to pour all of this new information into you if you're going to keep doing the same behaviors? So I got to see the conflict. So I'm down here praying and trying to work out, you know, my sense of believing or faith, but yet my contradiction in behavior upstairs was, no, I'm preparing to die. So I began to see my own behaviors. And so once that was shown to me, then I just had an openness of, okay, show me more. And so what came up for me, and traditionally from church, I'm looking for healing scriptures. I'm looking for, okay, you know, writing healing scriptures out. And I heard in meditation, tear them all up. And I was shown to begin at the beginning. And I was asked a question, who do you say that I am? And it turned into a beautiful journey inward, where each step was shown to me step by step. And one day in meditation, I was shown like all of these mountains. And this was really, really like a subconscious level of seeing inside of me. And I'm expecting cancer to be the tallest mountain. And what I could see on the labels are the rocks of these mountains. One was rage, you know, one was shame, one was guilt, one was kind of this disbelief. And they were all just as tall as cancer. And so it's like, and I had this, okay, you're showing me what is really the root. So we're getting to the root of this. And it turned into this beautiful walk of understanding of truth, understanding of my identity, and how to move in that space. And I was presented in meditation an option. And it said, and I clearly heard that this does not have to kill you. It's your choice. And I felt like, and right after that, a biochemist was introduced to me, and he asked me one question, and he said, what did you eat today? And he also asked me, how did you do that? How did you get here, little girl? And I'm like, what? You know, no one would do this to themselves. Like, no. And it was like, you know, I had to sit with that. And I was like, well, if I did do it to myself, I can undo it. So I'm moving from survivor to creator. Wow. And that was the transition. And so I went into what I call is like a deconstruction phase. And I was shown my process was kind of in phases. And one being deconstruction, the next being ascension, and then there was manifestation of healing. So I was diagnosed in February of 2019. I was preparing for a wedding in June. And I was told to cancel all of that was not going to happen. But by the beginning of June, there was no evidence of disease. And it was this process of this beautiful inward journey. It's a very loving, beautiful story, but it started there and it's continuing now, even more, even as we talk now, I can see how my process, and so I view it now as cancer being more of a catalyst or this drive inward, and meeting my inner healer and some of my own abilities and gifts, and really learning to move in my voice. So that's what my process looked like. And it really, to sum it all up, and people who I ended up writing, I was shown to write a book in my process, and people who read my book say, well, it wasn't really about cancer. And I was like, no, it wasn't. Cancer was like the first chapter. And then you see this inward journey the rest of the process. And deconstruction was my first phase. And it was like the conscious dissection of an understanding or belief to the point of exposing the contradictions in behavior and internal oppositions, which keep the very belief from manifestation. So I had to address shame. I had to address guilt. I had to address all of these things that kept me from believing that wholeness was mine, that love was mine, that there was no separation or isolation or this having to do it all on my own, that I could ask for help, that a lot of the patterns learned as a child and just waiting each day for step-by-step instructions of what to do next, how to move here, and learning to be very present. And living in the moment when you're told 6 months, like each moment matters to me. And it created an environment for me to be very present with whomever I was around. So it opened up a lot of doors and a lot of tools for healing. So I used a lot of my diet. I was shown the importance of eating habits and also doing the emotional work, my energy work. And so now we are 12 years later. So
12 years later, when they initially said 6 months to 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
And all of which, first, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing all of that, because there was nothing you left unturned, unspoken, right? And what I really appreciated about everything, where you wrapped it up with, it started with deconstruction. You had to start there because all of the things that had been put on you, all of the things that you accepted and called in, all of the things that you inherited, it was like, let me sit down, be still.
Be still. Yes.
And unpack this.
Yeah. And that's,
I now need to relearn.
Yeah, relearning. So some emotional responses, emotional patterns, redundancy. It was like, whoa, I could just see it time and time again. And it was like, stop. Like, if this is what it takes to get you to stop. And I would just call it praise, worship, stillness, praise, worship. And I would just get still. And being able to stay in the stillness without feeling like you had to do something. Like I always had like these multiple degrees, these multiple jobs. And in this situation, it's like, no, hold up. I can't get another job to work through this. I can't add another degree because this is something I don't know how to handle. And you won't give me the tools to handle it. I'm looking for the outer to give me. And it's like, no, let's go inward.
The outer satisfaction. How many of us do that? I know I'm guilty. Me stay in school and get how many degrees? I know I'm in school all the time. In school, right? Always working and doing something, right? Always. If I get paid to go to school, I would. Everybody knows that.
That's the same with me. And
how many times, right? And how many of us in the community show up like that? Avoiding things that we know and filling it with doing.
Absolutely.
Because being requires us to unpack.
We gotta face it.
Deconstruct, right? Deconstruction. And what was the next thing before manifestation?
Ascension. So releasing the patterns, and then in destruction phase, I call it the valley. And then ascension, there's a chapter called Vantage Points. And at my view of my entire process, that this is not to kill me, but what is it? And I could begin to see this light, and more things started to show up, and the fact that I'm hearing and there's clarity, and I'm moving in this place of joy. And people I would show them like, who has cancer? Like there was like, I just see light. So there was this movement of so many things, like issues with my mom had to be addressed, issues with my dad had to be addressed. And I'm like, okay, this is really dealing with cancer. And we're not shown that way. And so after my process, I went to speak. I was all over the US. I was at DC, but right before Obamacare, and gave my story in the sense of, and there was a chapter in my book where I'm describing torture. This is cruel and unusual punishment. I'm trying to figure out, should I take a hot shower? Should I lay on this side? I'm fighting it, and I can't see that this is, you want my kids to watch me die, and to die from cancer is a very painful death. So this is cruel and unusual punishment. So there was a passage of once you're diagnosed, you immediately, if you have a diagnosis, regardless of your financial situation, that you have access to treatment, because it was a violation of the Eighth Amendment, that it was cruel and unusual punishment to send me home, and you have medicine right there, right? And there are ways to assist, and it was denied to me, and it happens a lot. So yeah, I've gone into communities, and what always shows up, always, and I was like, okay, I can't go, I have to go the way that I went with my process, is the emotional things that are there, and that we have to really face. So it's like, give me tools and assist me with that space.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And just to kind of piggyback off on some of the trauma and things that you experienced, Dr. Swift, from the space of like the psychological impact of being diagnosed with a terminal disease, being denied treatment, and then what all that can call up, right? It can, all of those experiences. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, just to kind of make a comment on that?
Okay, but I mean, one word comes to mind: trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so in Allison's case, to be, I'm going back to what you're saying first. You're talking about having this life-altering, life-threatening, right,
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis that you have to face. You have to consider your own mortality. You have to make plans. She went through all of that, right, before she transitioned into another way of understanding and healing. I'm assuming there's a healing that happened, because it certainly sounds like that to me. But the initial piece is very traumatic. I'm thinking about someone that I know very dear to me was diagnosed with cancer, but it turned out it was not an accurate diagnosis. It wasn't cancer. And so even with that, and one would think it's like, oh, whew, yay, I'm no, it was extraordinarily traumatic. What he psychologically had to go through to prepare for his own death, that's heavy, that's deep, that's trauma. But it was beautiful how Allison took that trauma, right? You talk about post-traumatic death. I'm sorry, post-traumatic growth. I said death. Post-traumatic growth. Like, her story is truly a story of post-traumatic growth, right? There's not only just post-traumatic, post-trauma, but you have the growth. And she actually manifested that post-traumatic growth from the trauma, because you can't have post-traumatic growth if that trauma doesn't impact you. So there was an impact. And then she took that impact and went deeper and then sprung up. And that's just a beautiful story. So inspirational. And I don't know if that's what you wanted to hear, but that's what came to mind for me.
Well, that's what this is about, right? What is coming up in this conversation, because that's what it is. It's the experiences of us bringing our thoughts and experiences to the community.
Yes.
Because if it may not have been, say if that's what you said was what was needed to be heard.
Yeah, I say.
Right. So that is in each experience, in each of our contributions to this conversation, it's what needs to be said, because we all know, we came together beforehand, right, to pray and to ask for guidance, to ensure that what we were able to communicate was supportive to the community in which that we're seeking to serve. So thank you. And, in this particular, in this conversation, when you think about what we've, Allissen, mentioned about the rage and the resentment and the anger and things that she experienced beforehand, during, post, the whole experience brought up all of these emotions. We talked about earlier about domestic violence and how all of those emotions, all the emotions that underlie all of this, there's so many, we have so many different ways in which people avoid, heal, or, deal with, right? Whether it be, and most of it, what I know I have learned that I had to unlearn were behaviors that were outside behaviors, the doing. You know, after getting separated and then divorced, I at one time was working 4 jobs, going to school full time, and volunteering with 9 organizations. And I was a big sister. I was doing, trying to avoid, and I was dating, had a man, you know, all avoiding,
Not being,
constantly doing. Had no idea what it meant to be, because I knew that if it meant being, I didn't know what being meant. All I knew was what to do. I didn't even know. I didn't know anything about, you know, in order to be, so that you can know what to do, and then you can have the experience that you desire. That was nowhere near far in my consciousness. The only part of that I knew was do. And people would ask, how do you do it all? And I don't know. I just do it. But in now and being able to be in the making conscious choices, and learning and understanding what it means to be still, to learn and understand how the benefit of, you know, meditation, of, you know, Reiki, of, you know, what it is to be aware and conscious of, you know, energy. And, you know, there's the space of all of this in, you know, alternative therapies, being able to understand what that is, because it's not always, as we've heard from Allissen, it's not the conventional treatment. It's going to require us to do some and to be. While, you know, conventional treatment is supportive in healing, the healing process, we can also support in that being coupled with is that being work.
Absolutely.
And Daphne, can you talk about some of the beingness and what, you know, alternative therapies look like as relates to even your expertise and some of the things that you do?
Sure, I'd love to. I was listening to Allissen, and one of the things I so applaud you on is being willing to look within and seeing what your experiences, what part they played in your illnesses. So many people are, you know, they get a diagnosis or they're going through something, but it's everybody else's fault. It's everything except for what role did I play in this? So I truly applaud you. And I have to say, I will be making my appointment like tomorrow. It's time. I mean, it hasn't been long, it's been a year, but I was like, okay, it's time for me to go. But when we look at alternative therapies, I looked for a definition. It's basically a term that describes medical treatments that are used instead of traditional therapies. Some people refer to it as integrative or a complementary medicine. But like over 50% of people in the country say, hey, they use some form of alternative medicine as part of their regular practice. One of the things I always like, even with my own clients, I say it doesn't replace, it enhances. So I work with therapists so that, you know, I know my role, I know my lane, but, you know, there's certain things that other people are, you know, much better at and they're certified for. So I'm willing to pass on. But some of these complementary medicines or modalities include energy healing, the Reiki, shamans, IET, Qigong, Tai Chi, aromatherapy, crystals. I'm a medium. So as I listen to several of the things that were going on, one of the things that I get to witness is the generational trauma and how it has played a role in, you know, relationships or people that are going through like the domestic violence. Also for breast cancer victims, I'm also able to see like their healing. I'm able to answer questions for them if they're struggling. I just got a diagnosis. I don't know where I am. They don't know how their beliefs are going to be affected. And so I can kind of give them a glimpse in my experience with, spirit, and depending on where they are in their healing, if they're not going to be healed on this side, I can give them comfort. I can comfort the family. So all these modalities really play a role in supporting both things, the domestic violence, as well as those that are going through breast cancer healing, their survivors, whatever their diagnosis is. Aromatherapy is amazing. Setting that environment for nurturing. Meditation, you mentioned that, where you're able to help the person release that monkey mind and be present instead of the what ifs or what happened before and what's coming. It gives them peace of mind. It reduces the stress. It reduces the anxiety and helps them find balance as they're moving forward in their healing, not only for themselves, but for their families. So those are just some of the many, you have music therapy, essential oils, all of them play a role in creating that sacred space that the person is going through their healing through. So that's what I am blessed to be able to bring to the table for the clients that I work with, whether it's breast cancer or any kind of cancer that they're going through, or other traumas that they're doing. I deal with a lot of traumas. So it's like helping them find that balance and peace is what I'm able to do through those modalities. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I said, what is being responded is what is to be heard, right? So it is, in those, and I feel that it's imperative as far as our healing and wellness and whole wellness, right? Because there's wellness, but then there's whole wellness.
Yeah.
Because that is what I desire for my own self to experience. That is what desire what my family to experience. That is what I desire Black people to experience, right? All of humanity experience, but I'm a Black woman, so my primary concern is Black people. And, it is imperative to me to feel in what that looks like in whole wellness. And this whole conversation, I wanted to bring this together with alternative therapies. We then have, our therapist, right? She can talk about how that mental, in the studies and the clinicians piece of it, right? And then we have the experience. So bringing all of that together, we're able to pour into our community and give a different choice. Yes, we, as Daphne mentioned, this does not replace your treatment, right? This is to support and enhance your healing.
Absolutely.
If whatever it is that you desire is best for you and your families as regards to treatment, whether it just be the traditional treatment, going to the doctor, you in the space of breast cancer and chemo. However, what is it that you can also enhance that? Because dealing with the emotional, right? Because dis-ease is DIS-ease, right? So there's some type of uneasiness in the body. So what if we're able to support ourselves in bringing ease and grace within, so then our physical can have a different experience in that, when whatever it is that the treatment that we are receiving, that they go hand in hand. Allissen mentioned about eating, and she had to work on what she was, physically eating, also feeding your mind. All of those things have contribute to whole wellness. Monique?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I missed it, but did you ever have any conventional treatment?
I did. I went through the process, eventually had, it was a little bit later. It's probably maybe I was diagnosed in February, not until like March. So I started working with a biochemist diet, and he began to have me eat. I was eating 7 times a day, mostly high veggies, fruit, working with a lot of the herbs, and just really continue to do my work, meditation. And in meditation, I would hear, and now that I hear I'm amongst family, the medium there, I would hear steps that I was to do each day. And for me, my process, I was shown that I am a shaman. So I was extracting a lot of the core beliefs in a sense of moving in between the realms of my subconscious. But I eventually was shown, and it just happened. I was at one place and this lady walked up to me and she gave me a number and she said, call this number. And I said, and I just took it and she said, no, they'll help you, call this number. And I called the number, and this was the program was initiated after the violation of the 8th Amendment. So it's the breast and cancer treatment program. So just a diagnosis, then you're offered treatment. So I was able to get some surgery and treatments through that program towards probably around March.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
For that. Now, ladies, we are a little over time. I appreciate your patience, and I appreciate for everybody sticking around. And so I want to ask, and I want to wrap up. Based on our conversation, based on your presence today, thank you, Allissen. Thank you, Daphne. Thank you, Monique. I am so very grateful. So based on what we've all kind of come together with, what is one takeaway that you would like everyone in the community to take away from what was discussed here?
One takeaway. I think one of the things that I heard when Dr. Monique was talking was, we are failed by the community sometimes. And one of the things that kept resonating, I'm a resource guide for domestic violence. And one of the things that resonated with me was how our doctors fail us. And then listening to you, Allissen, and so many of the things, information that they could be giving us, even how they dismiss things, even in the office. So like, as we go into an office, they're supposed to ask if there's intimate partner violence. They fail to do that. They're supposed to ask how your emotional health is, and they apologize to you. I know all of you have experienced, if you've gone to a doctor, I'm so sorry, we have to ask these questions. Yeah. So, but they don't want you to really answer it because they don't want to deal with it.
Right.
Takeaway.
They ain't trying to hear it.
They don't want to hear it. They don't want to be bothered. So I think one of my commitments as a resource guide, and I work with a breast cancer survivor group, is that I want to do more to have that communication with the doctor community about the things that they can do to help support and bring the conversation up. Don't ask me if I'm being abused in front of my abuser, what can you do to not only ask, but to listen so that you can, even if you can't do anything, there are resources, there are 800 numbers. Have the 800 number hanging up in the doctor's office. But that's my takeaway. And that's what I want to do. I want to see if I can help further that conversation within the community so that we have the information and resources readily available.
So I heard a takeaway and a commitment.
That's a takeaway.
Right.
So is that a commitment that I hear of you, that is your contribution to moving the needle forward?
That's my contribution to moving the needle forward. Yes, it is.
Thank you. Thank you. So whoever would like to go next, you can, state your takeaway and commitment if you like at once. I mean, state your commitment.
Okay. So, okay. I don't know. For me, I'd have to say that if there's any takeaway that I would like for people to, draw from this, is that I would say the recognition that your health, your wellness, is rooted in balance and harmony. And I feel like Allissen's testimony, really, her story is a testimony to that balance and harmony, first with yourself, right? Then with others around you, and then also with nature as well. And so, that, and that uphold your wellness, whether it's a physical wellness or a mental wellness, because they're inextricably tied to one another. The fallacy is that they're two different things, and they're not. Again, Allissen is a testimony to that. So yeah, that balance, the harmony and the balance within self and others and nature. That's what I'd like for people to take away. And I guess in terms of moving the needle forward, I would have to say that my commitment, I was inspired by Allissen's story, and my commitment would be really to, I'm always focusing on everybody else's wellness, really focus a lot more to be, it and not just promote it. So that, to walk my own walk that I'm talking, that's really it. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm so proud of you for that. Excellent. Allissen?
Yes, so many takeaways. I really enjoyed our conversation and the time. And for me, just really the key piece is, and what I keep hearing or seeing is kind of this face-to-face, that we are each other's reflection and mirror and a lot of things, and being open, being willing and to face ourselves. And I had to have a face-to-face moment with myself, and it was the question of, who do you say that I am? I had to say, God, I know who the pastors say you are, I know who my mama say you are, but I don't know you. And in not knowing that space, I didn't know myself. So it was just, the more that I grew to know that, the more that I could see me. And the self-identity is crucial, and being able to see yourself outside of the guilt, the rage, and the things that have been taught to us and learned, behaviors and responses, but getting to the truth. And I heard in one moment with one of my doctors, and I had been well for a while, and I heard from one of my guides that, it's a common scripture, is that your faith has now made you whole. And it was so impactful. It meant more to me in that moment than any hearing that I didn't have cancer or anything, because and I understood faith as my understanding of truth, that my understanding of truth has now made me whole. And I knew wholeness in a place of identity, the place of emotion, this place of harmony. And it wasn't about the cancer. It was about my relationship with self, my view of how I move and be in this realm. And from that moment, I would have, and speaking to Daphne's one doctor, and I ended up at one of the best hospitals, City of Hope. It's a cancer cancer treatment center. And one of my doctors shared with me, he said, I've been here for, it was like over 20 years, and I've only seen a tumor completely gone before surgery in one other woman. And he wanted me to shout and this and that. And I was like, I want to meet the one other woman, because I want to know the level of work she did, because I know what work I did to face and to feel and to address my emotions, address everything that I was avoiding, and had to look at myself and look at myself again and look at myself again. And from that time, and the takeaway would be addressing or approaching or the commitment, spirit, mind. We always say spirit, mind, body, but I, in my wholeness center, is spirit, mind, emotions, body. So my commitment is to always, wherever I speak, if I can't come here or come the way that I can only bring me and my experiences, and we're going to talk about the emotions. We're going to talk about the underbelly to a lot of the disease that's going on and that's happening. And I'm called not only to cancer, but I'm speaking to hypertension, to diabetes, because it's all rooted in key pieces that are under there. So.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Amen to that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So you got quite a few commitments and what I would like to add from the piece of educating doctors and being committed to ensuring that these platforms, using your platform to support the Black community, because that is where the disconnect happens with our treatment. That is where because medical apartheid is real. I've not read that book, medical apartheid, add it to your list. And it is real. So that is an extreme take on that can happen and can create change for us. So thank you, Daphne. The commitment and the importance of balance and harmony with self that Monique mentioned, and being able to being in the space that she supports. And, you know, Monique, she is a very powerful being, you know, and when I say she gives of every piece of her, she does. And the joy that I personally felt to hear her say that she would be committed to being for her own self. Because I know my dear friend and my colleague, and just in all the spaces that she sits as the president of the NJABSI and the representative for the Eastern, for the National ABSI, for National Association of Black Psychologists, and the various different ways that she shows up in the world, and for her to say that she is now committed to be. I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you.
And Allissen, just being in all of your experience and your commitment to be who you are, to show up authentically as yourself, like you said, you with family, right? We all hear it, we know it, and it is a space in which that we appreciate your vulnerability. And, you know, what I loved what you said about, you reference that scripture, faith has to be made, faith has now made you whole. And that wasn't just the faith outside of what you can do, it was the faith within. The faith of being, the faith of getting to, like you said, the underbelly of what was happening in your life, and being committed to not just in spirit, mind, and body, but no, spirit, mind, emotion, and body, because that is the underbelly. And for me, you know, one of the takeaways that I would like, you know, the community to hear in alignment with all of what my dear sisters have said was something that Allissen brought up in It's Damn. Deconstruction, ascension, and manifestation. So in order to, first you got to deconstruct so you can get to the point and to move to ascension. So then you can then manifest what you desire to experience. So that is my prayer for the community, to deconstruct so that you can then ascend and then manifest what you desire. And I like to call it what I call focus. Fearlessly overcome challenges using self-love, because all things start with you. So I pray that the community focus, and that all that you do and all that who you are, you know who you are. Yeah. And it is by being present to who that is that will allow you and propel you into standing into who you are. So that it can now move from here to here, and continue to manifest here. So then you just show up in the truth of your being. And it is my commitment to continue to show up for the community and have these let's talk about conversations, so that we may each individually contribute to moving the needle forward to healing and wholeness for the people of African diaspora. So I thank you, my sisters. I appreciate all of you, because just about 2 years ago, I had an extreme phobia of the camera because I did not want to be seen. And I was hiding, and I had muted my voice, and I was very fearful of the opinions and the rejection and judgment and shame and blame and all the other stuff that I used to tell myself. So I thank each and every one of you, because in some way, shape, or form, you have supported me in getting here. So I say thank you. And I am very grateful that our lives have now brought us to this now moment.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
to your commitments and a little ask. There, I now have a forum on my website, SaraLiz.com, where you can post your commitment. And
You're gonna make us do it, huh? Now we gotta put it out here, put it out there.
greatly appreciate
Now
it.
we gotta
Yes.
manifest.
It supports in holding one accountable, right? And also it supports the community in understanding and seeing that we all have made our commitments. And for those of you out there, if you're watching or watch the replay, I encourage you to visit SaraLiz.com and you make your own commitment as to how you can support in moving the needle forward to healing and wholeness in our community.
All right, all right.
So I thank you. And until next time, we will kind of have a conversation next month's conversation, November, will be related to seasonal depression and also seasonal brokenness for y'all that go broke trying to please and do all the things for the holidays. So let's release those behaviors.
Yes.
We'll talk about that, and I hope that you'll join me for the next Let's Talk About conversation. And our peace be unto all of you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Love y'all.
Bye-bye.
It's great seeing you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks.